Emotions ran as high as the Alps themselves as a grateful people honored the memory of a young Army bombardier from Cohoes and his Texas co-pilot.
With their blood, Lucian, Crutchfield, and William Brooks have become a symbol.
Larry Pisoni was a 7-year-old kid called Enzo when on February 27, 1945, he saw his first Americans, 2 handsome GIs being held captive by the Nazis.
The Nazi fascist propaganda would just depict them as mean monsters. Of course, they were bombing us, so I thought they must be. Instead, seeing them so nice, and it really changed my mind all of a sudden.
Pisoni was shocked to hear they had been killed by the Nazis on the road outside the small town of Arco. And ever since then, this memorial has been a lifelong dream for Larry Pisoni, the 7-year-old Italian boy who saw those American soldiers and never forgot.
I just stopped all of a sudden with the car because, you know, even when it must have been like some sort of destiny, because even if I was playing the radio, I would turn it off. I said, this is where they were killed. So I said, okay, now I've been saying this for 50 years, and maybe I should do something about it.
And so Larry found a way to say thank you to all the 38,800 Americans like Bill Brooks and Lucian Crutchfield who were killed on Italian soil. And so on a beautiful sunny day at the base of the Alps, where their plane had been shot down, hundreds of people went back in time to a sky raining hardware and flames.
I had real mixed emotions about coming to what I thought was a funeral. But being here, I see so much more.
The crew of that B-25, the survivors, were there. Navigator Bob Cravey, radio man Charles Reagan, and pilot Jay DeBoer. Catherine Castricane had flown from Malta to represent her Uncle Bill. She recalled not so much the man, but the sadness of his death.
I was kind of choked up. I was so proud of my uncle. I mean, I didn't know him that well because I was so little, but I remember my grandmother and I remember her feelings, which I carry with me.
Gordon Colony of Broad Alban had entered the service with the guy he called Buckets. They wanted to be pilots together. Colony made it. Brooks became a bombardier.
Oh, I think he'd probably be embarrassed. He would be excited, but, you know, he was a very generous person, and he'd rather give than take, I'm sure.
Flight crews rotated often during those days, but DeBoer had flown many missions with Brooks.
He was good. He was the fastest bombardier I've ever flown with, making a bomb run. And he was a great guy.
The ceremony ended with a prayer and a salute, and a lifetime of gratitude goes on. And now, 50 years later, in the shadow of the Italian Alps, Bill Brooks of Cohoes and his co-pilot will live forever. Their plaque here at the monument says it best. 2 of more than 38,000 Americans who gave their lives on Italian soil during World War II to help Europeans of goodwill regain freedom and democracy. Tomorrow, the story of the surviving members of Miss Bobby. This is Liz Bishop reporting from Dro in the Italian Alps. They were there to remember 2 young American soldiers killed trying to defend Italy in 1945. But this was also a ceremony for the living.
With their blood, Lucian, Crutchfield, and William Brooks have become a symbol.
The surviving crew members of the B-25, nicknamed Miss Bobby, honored their friends and fallen comrades, Bill Brooks of Cohoes and Lucian Crutchfield of Texas. But they also confronted their own memories of 50 years ago. When the B-25 called Miss Bobby took a hit over the Italian Alps, the crew bailed out safely, but it would be 50 years before any of them would see each other again.
You look great.
At the train station, navigator Bob Cravey embraced the Italian family who had saved his life. He looked around a tiny room where he had been kept until the war was over, a room from which he could see German soldiers from his window. He emotionally talked about the Italian family and their courage.
They could have been killed, but they are just brave and strong folks.
Charles Reagan did not fall into safe hands. He found himself surrounded by German soldiers.
I just walked out with my hands up, and they just grinned at me and said, put my hands down, motioned for me to put them down, which I did, and they walked up and they were quite friendly.
One of those soldiers saved his life by arguing loudly with a trigger-happy SS man.
He would get so agitated, the SS officer would at times, and turn and glare, just glare at me, and pull his pistol out of the holster.
Reagan spent 2 months in a German prison camp before the war ended. World War II's overworked pilots challenged death every day. Some, like Jay DeBoer, came out a winner. He walked out of Italy 5 weeks after bailing out of his B-25.
Yeah, I thought I could fly anything home at any time, you know.
Including Miss Bobby.
When anything happened.
You didn't expect Miss Bobby to...
When we couldn't feather a prop and couldn't, fire extinguisher wouldn't work, we couldn't put the fire out, so we had to get out.
With the help of an Italian priest and some young Italian girls, he survived a harrowing ride on a German troop train dressed as a shell-shocked Italian soldier.
I haven't told anyone before this, but there was an SS officer sitting, I was sitting knee to knee with him on this train. And I wanted to kill the SOB so bad because they just told me before that, 2 days before that, they'd killed Brooks and Crutchfield.
DeBoer kept his cool and eventually escaped over the Alps to Switzerland. And if we know what happened to the crew members aboard that B-25, we also now know what happened to Miss Bobby herself. The scrap metal ended up here in a gate in the town of Vizzano. The survivors touched it with reverence, their first contact in 50 years with a long-lost friend.
If that's part of our plane, I think it looks a little better than I remember, because last time I saw it blew up.
From the balcony of Vizzano Town Hall, you can see where the B-25 bomber crashed to the earth. William Brooks parachuted safely to the top of that mountain, but that's where his good luck ended. Brooks and the co-pilot ended up in the hands of the enemy. Bill Brooks' sad story ended the next day here on the road to Dro. The story goes that he and co-pilot Lucian Crutchfield were being marched by the Nazi soldiers when